Hello and welcome to this video updating you on the progress of a trunk fusion experiment we started approximately a year ago. Trunk fusion is a means of thickening trunks if you lack time or are impatient. It can be particularly useful if the trunk is especially thin, the species is slow growing, or you're grafting other parts of the bonsai such as roots or branches where you may find it easier to graft an entire whip onto the side of the tree where you get both the root, increase the trunk girth, and a branch. About a year ago we set up a demonstration of just this. It is a Crassula species, also known as jade tree, money tree, or jade plant. It's a kind of succulent. Unlike a lot of other succulents, it is very similar in looks to a normal tree used for bonsai. The only obvious caveat are the leaves, which are quite plump, circular, and not very similar to normal leaves up close. At a distance, and quite honestly the distance most people would be viewing this at an exhibition, you can't really tell the difference very well. This is some of its strength. But also, the bark is a very wood-like appearance, and you'll be hard-pressed, even up close, to tell that it was not a regular tree based on the bark alone. For the purposes of fusing the trunks, we set up this trunk fusion demonstration and involved a series of thin trunks planted around a roughly 50mm PVC pipe, or 2-inch PVC pipe. They were then tied hard against the pipe itself. They could only grow left, right, or away from the pipe. This meant it would either have the choice between thickening in depth or fusing to those trunks on either side of the one in the middle of each trio. The results of this are surprising but in some ways also predictable. The project has grown a lot in the upwards direction. There is some fusion happening as well. As we also expected, some of these saplings have died. It is, however, far behind where we had hoped it would be, but that is also something that can be understood in the context of the problems found once you've actually come back to it. Some of this we can explain quite easily, others not so much. The most obvious problem is that the trunk of the Crassula species grow very slowly. We were expecting that 1 year would be enough to begin fusing the trunks, but it has not happened entirely. Well, at all in fact for some of these. Only some of the trunks have started to fuse together. Since we had put them together relatively tightly, it was hoped that they wouldn't have any choice but to fuse. Unfortunately, it appears that the gaps we did leave behind were enough. Part of this problem is also that they should only have been able to grow to the left, right, or outwards. The small branches behind the trunks have opened room for the trunk to grow in all directions for some of these. That's obviously a problem, and we obviously missed some of these growths. Or alternatively, they started growing after we planted it out, and due to our neglect, they've continued to grow. Further, the twine used did not hold up, and so, as it broke, the trunks were no longer secured in place. While we will use twine again for now, it would be a good idea to change this to something like grafting tape or possibly raffia going forwards. If we really needed to, we could use something like painter's tape or masking tape. This would be useful insofar as it's relatively permanent, but it will also break down over time. At least in relative terms, it would be much longer lasting than twine, not as dangerous as grafting tape, but also easy to remove. The upside to all of this is that the branch structure is developing slowly but surely, especially towards the top of the planting. It has developed quite a bit at the top end of the PVC pipe, and this is also both a benefit and a demerit. As it grows upwards, we'll need to look at how to fuse that part of the trunk. This will need to wait until the bottom area around the PVC pipe is complete or very close to. That way we can tie it together at the juncture higher up and get a much more smooth taper effect after removing the pipe that's acting as a guide for now. For this reason, although cutting the growth short would encourage trunk girth, we would also limit future plans. Therefore, the plan is not so much to make any changes or really do any pruning to this. It's very much to leave it as it is. The only exception to that will be the replacement saplings for those that have died, and possibly to try and squeeze in a few more that might fill in some of the gaps that exist now and will take much longer to grow. For that reason, we'll need to remove the dead saplings, we'll need to put in new ones, and possibly repot. It'll be a case of observing it once we try to get the new saplings in and see how developed the root mass is, as it looks to be growing out of the bottom of the growing pot right now. In summary, it's not progressing as quickly as hoped. This is not due to any failures on the part of the tree at all. It's not being well cared for. It's sat at the back of the greenhouse, largely uncared for. It's only received a small amount of fertilizer and watered by virtue of being near other plants that were being watered. Perhaps with more attention, we could have achieved better results. But this is not a time-sensitive project, so as we progress with the trunk, fusion updates will be made, but be aware that there are certainly things we could have done much better at this time, but also these are good opportunities to show in our failures where you yourself might be better served with small changes. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.